During the Clone Wars, there were far more warriors on the High Council than there have been in many hundreds of years, and every member of the High Council rightfully earned their seat and status as a very powerful Jedi Master. But perhaps few more than Master Fisto. Hailing from the world known as Glazing, Kit always wore a smile in combat to show that he was rooted in joy and peace. The light side of the Force provided him with everything he needed. His relaxed nature served him extremely well in the tense atmosphere of the war, and no matter how many brushes with the darkness that the Jedi Master had, he remained steadfast in the Jedi path. The thing that we should all know about the light side is that it rewards diligence and long suffering, and Kit Fisto was certainly rewarded. His power and skill was considered him among the best duelists of the entire Jedi Order. There is definitely a reason that Mace Windu believed that he was required when going to face the Dark Lord Sidious. In all things considered, Kit Fisto held his own, lasting the longest of the 3 Jedi besides Windu. So today, my friends, let's take a look into how strong Kit Fisto really was, and how he rightfully earned his place as one of the greatest warriors on the High Council. Where does he stack up to others such as Plo Koon, Windu, and Yoda? Before we direct his combat feats though, we first want to talk about his impact on the Jedi Order. Kit Fisto was not simply a master who went out and devastated a battlefield, but Kit had a great influence on one very important key aspect of Jedi life. Growing up in the temple, he was surprised to hear of the waterproofing lightsabers was optional. Being an amphibious species himself, he was constantly going in and out of water. In fact, Fisto had a special tank of water that he used for meditation. But he noticed that hardly any Jedi could actually waterproof their lightsabers successfully, and if they did, it was more just a watertight casting, so that if they were submerged, their weapon wouldn't be damaged. As a result of the shortcoming though, Kit Fisto ended up pioneering the technology that would allow a lightsaber to actually function successfully underwater. This was a feature that was previously believed to be impossible. Fisto would customize his lightsaber to utilize 2 crystals instead of 1. He created what is called a bifurcating cyclical ignition pulse. We aren't entirely sure how it functioned specifically, but the function allowed lightsabers to continuously operate in both heavy rainfall and underwater. This innovation was revolutionary, as it was widely adopted by the Jedi Knights of the Clone Wars era. This function became so popular that the Council requested that Fisto make an entry in the Great Holocron on the modification of the lightsaber. This was a great honor. When the Clone Wars broke out, Jedi almost unanimously made this addition when they saw the combat of aquatic planets such as on Kamino and Mon Calamari, as well as combat on rainy worlds such as Jabiim. Anakin Skywalker would make this modification to his own lightsaber, a feature which would surprise Luke in the future. But this wasn't the only underwater invention that Kit Fisto made. He also pioneered the ability of Force Orb. This was a power to create a dense sphere of Force energy within the water. He used this power to great effect during the Battle of Mon Calamari, where his Force Orb was so powerful that it shreds straight through several layers of Durasteel, taking out a Separatist superweapon in a single shot. But as we continue on, you'll see that Kit Fisto's relationship with lightsabers runs very deep. While his feats in the Force are few, it was at the lightsaber that he was most renowned. In the novel The Cestus Deception, we get to see a highlight on the friendship between Kit and Kenobi as they uncover a plot involving Jedi killing droids, and it's here where we truly get a deeper aspect of Kit Fisto's nearly unparalleled skill. In the weeks following the Battle of Geonosis, Obi-Wan was looking to modify his own style after suffering a terrible defeat at the hands of Dooku. He would end up asking his friend and the powerful Jedi Kit Fisto to repeatedly spar with him so that he could better understand what his own weaknesses were, how to improve and perfect Form 3 Sarisu. For days, the two of them sparred in one continuous duel. In the book, Obi-Wan makes the remark that Kit Fisto's defense is basically perfect, as he could detect no flaws in it. But one thing became very clear as Obi-Wan began to spar further with him, is despite being his absolute best, Kit Fisto was holding back. Obi-Wan was pressing the limits of his form, but Fisto was simply learning. But Obi-Wan comments that it's not in the way that 2 training partners do when they are attempting to not actively harm one another. Kit Fisto was deliberately giving himself disadvantages against Obi-Wan. Obi-Wan not only discovered that Kit Fisto was a far better swordsman than he was, but that he was hampering his balance, limiting his speed, and emphasizing his non-dominated side. And despite all of these limitations, Obi-Wan commented on how astonishingly aggressive and intuitive he was. Of course, this was a post-Attack of the Clones Obi-Wan. So far as the Master of Sarisu that we know, he has not become yet. But something isn't made entirely clear. It isn't known if it was because of Kit Fisto that Obi-Wan actually learned how to grow from his weaknesses and became a Master of Sarisu and a Jedi Master so quickly. He and Anakin of course sparred ceaselessly together as well, but now we see who Obi-Wan was actually trying to measure up to on the council, and this is where we talk about Kit Fisto's own unique lightsaber form. Famously, Kit Fisto was a master of the first form of lightsaber combat, Shi-Cho. Not many chose to specialize in this form since it was the most basic one taught to all Jedi younglings. It is literally the way of learning how to hold and to swing a lightsaber, which makes sense considering its roots. Form 1 was created when the Jedi made their transition from metal force-imbued swords to energy blades of the lightsabers. Shi-Cho, also known as the Determination form, or the Way of the Sarlacc. This was characterized by simple two-handed broad strokes and wide-arcing movements. It was decent at blaster deflection, but mostly meant for crowd control. It was the foundation by which all other lightsaber forms were built upon, and a great all-around form to fall back on in the heat of combat when everything else had failed. The specialization of Shi-Cho was in disarmament, and a key technique was known as the shim. This was a blow made with the very edge of the blade to inflict a superficial wound, usually one meant to cause an opponent to drop their weapon. Not many Jedi chose to take this form to mastery though, as they became enchanted by all of the other lightsaber forms on the list and what they could achieve. But for those few who did master Form 1, they would become a force of nature. When you stick to Form 1, you discovered that while the moves themselves are basic, they can be strung together in a very raw, unpredictable pattern. One can randomize their strikes, making their attack sequences wild, erratic. Fighting Kit Fisto was like fighting a literal force of nature. He was a rushing river, making movements that were seemingly unconnected, but came together in one cohesive, dangerous sequence. And he could intuit exactly how much pressure to administer, what moves to execute, and when to do it. However, there was a danger in going too far into Form 1. It was said that the wildness of Shi-Cho could potentially bring a Jedi to the edge of the dark side, because much like Form 5 Gem So, once a Shi-Cho practitioner gains momentum, they become a hurricane. But this is the best part about Kit Fisto. He knew exactly when to sink deeply into the randomness of his form, and when to pull back. He focused just as much on the defense as he did the offense, which made his attacks devastating as a Gem So user, but his defense as tight as a Sarisu practitioner. As we mentioned earlier, Fisto's easygoing nature aided spectacularly in exercising moderation. His smile wasn't just a personality quirk or a way to provoke and imbalance his enemy. It was a reminder to himself not to take the battle so seriously as to succumb to the wildness of his form. When Fisto entered a duel, he was totally relaxed. Entering a flow state for him was incredibly simple. His connection to the Force, incredibly simple as well. And when this happened, no one could keep up with him. Back to the book. During his and Obi-Wan's mission to Ord Cestus, they were investigating the operation of specialized droids that were meant to kill Jedi. They were known as the JK-13s. Arachnid-like droids with sharp stun tentacles that came out of their backs. But what made them dangerous to Jedi were that they were bio-droids. They used a living circuit design, incorporating organics into their core compressors. It is later revealed that their processor was actually a life support unit for a creature known as the Dashta Eel. These eels were force sensitive, granting the droids some measure of precognitive abilities, making them again dangerous for Jedi. It was said that they were even better at it than Jedi were, and Dooku was about to manufacture these droids to become specialized killers for Jedi during the Clone War. It would have been an absolute disaster if they were deployed. When Kit Fisto eventually encountered one, he had trouble with it at first, as its tentacles and long movements were indeed on par with that of a Jedi. Plus, the precognitive abilities from the eel were allowing them to keep up with all of his movements, even in his random wildness. But this is where we believe that Kit Fisto stopped holding back. He sunk so deeply into his randomness that its tentacles were unable to touch him at all, and it began slowly losing parts. It wasn't able to crunch data fast enough to account for his unorthodox attacks and pattern. Entering his flow state, Kit Fisto's speed baffled the precognition of the eel, and the droid's reflexes were simply outdone. His lightsaber movements were so complex and rapid that not even Obi-Wan's experienced gaze could keep up with it. His sense of timing was faster, more precise than any conscious thought, and the droid was reduced to prey. This wasn't the only time that Kit Fisto proved his superiority over Jedi-killing droids though. At one point, Grievous's Magna Guards made the mistake of pitting themselves against him. In Legends, these droids had been trained directly by Grievous himself, and they were considered on skill with many young Jedi Knights. But Fisto literally danced around them, twirling in such a way that he lopped off their limbs before they could do so much as strike. And in canon, he dueled against Grievous successfully. During the Clone Wars, Kit not only managed to disarm the general of a lightsaber, but proceeded to dual wield those sabers and to go on the offense. His randomness, ferocity, made it difficult for Grievous to copy his styles, as he had been successfully doing with so many other Jedi, and he found himself on the defense in a rare moment, especially when Kit changed it up to employ acrobatic techniques. Whenever Grievous finally managed to press an attack, he found out another feature of Form 1, fighting multiple enemies at a single time. The interesting thing about Shi-Cho is that the broad motions make use of the entire length of the lightsaber. This makes it excel at dealing with many weapons coming at the user at a single time. With 2 lightsabers in hand, Fisto was defending himself against the general's arms with a contemptuous ease. He was getting dangerously close to defeating the general before the Magna Guards appeared. Reasonably, Fisto could deal with either the guards or Grievous, but not both at once, which forced him on the retreat. But back to the EU, during the Cestus incident, Dooku was so concerned about Kit Fisto that he forced Ventress to not only touch up on her Makashi training, but he forced her also to relentlessly study Kit Fisto's own unique style. Form 2 was famously the counter to Form 1 simply because its precise strikes are able to disrupt and pierce the wide movements of its predecessor. Shi-Cho was not created with lightsaber combat in mind, which is just a further testament to how well Kit Fisto had mastered the form. When Ventress finally met him in combat, the two were a mind-numbingly blur of deadly force. For a time, they were equally matched, before Ventress gained the upper hand, requiring Obi-Wan to come in and help. But of course again, she had to deliberately study Kit Fisto's style instead of simply relying on the natural advantages of Form 2. Again, a form that on its own is superior to one in duels, but if she hadn't had prep time, it's unlikely that her victory would have ever been assured. This was Jedi Master Kit Fisto, the upper echelon of duelists of the Jedi Order, a man who earned his place on the Jedi High Council. A man who, in Attack of the Clones Obi-Wan Kenobi stated, had a better defense than he did. Windu was very confident when he chose Kit Fisto as a part of the Jedi strike team that was attempting to arrest Sidious, and although he fell quickly in the confrontation, he did outclass other members of the council, such as Sei Tin and Aegon Kolar, managing to block several of Sidious's strikes. In the novel though, which was originally going to be the movie version, Kit Fisto outlasted the other masters much longer in the duel with Sidious. He would actually go the distance with Darth Sidious for several more exchanges, before he was going to be beheaded by the Dark Lord. Either way, lasting that long against Sidious is a testament all in its own. We believe that just like Plo Koon, Kit Fisto is massively underrated, and should be considered amongst the strongest Jedi combatants, especially in this era. But of course, my friends, what do you think? What are your thoughts on the revolutionary Kit Fisto, one of the most feared Jedi of the Clone Wars era by the Sith, feared by both Dooku and Sidious to some extent? We've really been enjoying these respect videos, and if you want us to continue with the other members of the High Council, like the video and let us know down below. But until next time, my fellow students of the Force and friends, may the Force be with you always, and have a great day.